Well, now we're moving on to some community gardens that look more like what you usually envision a community garden being. And we're going to visit with some of the community gardeners here. And Dawn Holt is one of the gardeners. And Dawn, thanks for joining us at your plot today.
We're delighted to have you. Welcome to our community garden.
Thank you. Now we're actually at our community garden at the OSU-OKC John E. Kirkpatrick Horticulture Center. That was a big mouthful, but that's where we are. And there are several plots out here. And Dawn, you have an absolutely gorgeous plot here. And one of the things that I wanted everybody to see is you've done a wonderful job with your garden structures here.
Thank you. It was a lot of fun. The basis of this structure is rebar. It's actually, this particular rebar is 1/2 inch diameter, but you can make do with a lesser diameter. And it's crossed over in an X pattern and wedged down into the bottom into the cinder blocks so that I could then use some prunings off of fruit trees that were here. This is 2 years old, so what you're looking at, the structure part of it, is actually 2 years old.
Okay, so it's lasted well.
Yeah, well, and it's getting brittle. Probably I'll replace it next season. But it has done well for what I wanted it, and that was experimental purposes. This is a demonstration garden, and it gave me the opportunity to experiment as well. I like the idea of using things that are ordinary materials, as well as things that might be otherwise thrown away. And these were had been pruned off of fruit trees here, and gave me the chance to incorporate them.
Okay.
They start at the bottom by tying in along each leg, and I used twine that wouldn't degrade over time. It's heavy duty twine that happened to be waxed. It was brown to blend in, and then interwove the patterns of the branches, clipping off ones that came out at odd angles.
Okay. So you have basically you started and kind of followed the frame that you had with the rebar.
Exactly.
And then interwove into that.
Interwove and tied them together. I have a sheet if anyone's interested, because I've had inquiries about it. I've posted it out here that I'll send back with you if you'd like.
Well, now why, you had an arbor out here, and I know part of the reason in a community garden plot is to have space to grow upward, but there are some other reasons to have arbors out here.
Yes. This, as I mentioned, since it's demonstration, it gave me the chance to experiment with some structure. It also provides shade in the heat of the summer, and we've had a more than warm summer this year, so
That's true.
I was grateful for it. Earlier on in the season, I did grow vines, cucumber vines of it, but as they died out, I let the cypress vine come on because it's very prolific and it covers well.
Right. It is beautiful. It provides great shade, and I guess the one thing that we observed is if you do grow cypress vine as a shade, you'll need to be diligent about clipping your cypress vine so it doesn't take over your garden.
It will go everywhere.
Now, in your garden, you've basically focused on herbs.
Yes, herbs and then some of the smaller plants. I like a garden that combines the aesthetics of things to look at as well as things to utilize in cooking and eating.
And I noticed that you also have a lot of great butterfly plants in here.
Yes, that was one of the things that I wanted to accomplish, was to welcome the caterpillars to the garden.
So, well, this is a really nice looking garden, and I just love it. I'm going to go build these at home in my own garden.
You know, they're easy and they're a lot of fun. They go up in a weekend or less, and they come down just as easily when you're ready to experiment with something else.
Thanks a lot, Dawn.
You're most welcome. Thank you for coming.
Another one of the plots at the OSU Oklahoma City Community Garden is tended by one of our own Senior Master Gardeners, Bill Smith. Bill, thanks for joining us today.
Nice to be here.
And we really appreciate you showing us around your garden plot here. And you've actually got kind of a theme, a purpose for your garden, and maybe you could explain that to the viewers.
Certainly. I call this Opie's Garden. I use only open-pollinated seed. I plant intensively, close spacing, so I can squeeze as much produce as I can out of this little plot. And I use environmentally sound techniques, fertilizers, soil conditioners, things of that nature.
Well, great. Well, you have a great spot here, and maybe you just could explain some of the things that you've used in your garden.
All right. I used concrete blocks to frame it in and also to raise it up. I chose the single hole blocks instead of the double hole blocks so I could plant and squeeze a bit more produce out of that. I use mainly herbs to border it, a few small tomatoes, things of that nature. It's productive as well as ornamental, and it's practical. It helps raise up, and I have a raised bed situation at the same time.
You get better drainage that
way.
So now the plants that you've used in your garden, what types of vegetables do you grow?
I grow eggplant, an old open pollinated variety that's very ornamental at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
I have 2 or 3 types of basil. I have some sweet potatoes over here.
Mm-hmm.
I had some onions on the end there for a summer crop, and I'm going to be doing a fall crop of maybe some onions, some lettuce, Swiss chard, things of that nature.
Great. Now also, I've noticed that you do have a very nice trellis system going around 2/4 of your garden here. And this is basically a cattle panel?
Correct. I chose cattle panels and made it L-shaped to provide a little afternoon shade from the hot sun for the plants that are in here, however little it may contribute.
Mm-hmm.
And I also find that I can trellis up there. I had some trellis cucumbers and some vining squash that I ran up there, and I will rotate them next year, basically, again, to squeeze more produce out of it.
Great. That's always good to go up when you have a little space.
Yes, it is.
So now in this garden, I noticed that you've got a really nice layer of, looks like compost here.
These are worm castings.
Oh, these are great. That is so nice and crumbly.
And I grow them here on site.
Mm-hmm.
I got my start from John Blevins, the worm guy.
Mm-hmm.
He helped me get started in this, and I grow at least 2 or 3 crops a year and spread it out here and maybe share it with my fellow gardeners if there's any left over.
Great. And you've basically used it as a kind of a top dressing here in the fall then for your
Right.
fall crops. So now you talked about open pollinated seeds, and part of that whole process is paying attention to proper seed saving.
Correct.
And you've got some eggplant here, and maybe you could tell us like what the different stages are, because I noticed there's several different eggplant on here. If you could tell us the different stages that we can find here.
Be glad to. Basically, this is open pollinated. I can and do save the seed from this for other members of the Seed Savers Exchange, and I share it with my fellow master gardeners. What I am looking for is something like this that's not quite heavily purpled. It's got some striping in it.
Right.
Whereas this one over here is not quite heavily striped enough.
Right.
I'm trying to get a certain look, so I would save that one for seed saving purposes, and I would eat this one.
Okay.
And when it gets to this stage, and it turns a little bit deeper yellow, that's when it's mature and ready to eat. Or excuse me, to save seed from.
Ready to save seed. Now that's past the eating stage.
Correct.
So,
This is on toward the seed saving stage.
okay. So the stage that you harvest them to eat is much earlier than the stage that you would harvest for seed saving then.
Yes, it is.
So now, is that one ready to harvest? Can we go ahead and pick that one, or should we leave it a little bit longer?
I would leave it another couple of weeks, let it get a little bit darker.
Okay. Now you've actually got some that you've harvested that are ready to go ahead and be, the seed is ready to be saved from this?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Well, let's go look at that process.
All right.
We'll go ahead and step down here. Now, Bill, you've got all of the supplies laid out here to save seeds. What exactly does a person need if they're going to start this process?
Basically, you need something to wash the seeds off with and containers to put them in, dry them, store them, whatever you need. Basically, something to cut them open with and something to scoop them out with.
Okay. And then, of course, our ripe fruit.
Right.
Or vegetables is the case. So now we've got the eggplant here.
Right.
And let's go ahead and see how you do this. You're basically cutting them down the center.
Right. The seeds are mainly toward the bottom, so it's easier to scoop them out.
Mm-hmm. And you just scoop them into a bucket of water.
Bucket of water.
Okay.
And basically, you just agitate them, try to separate the seeds from the flesh.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're finished, you can throw these in the compost pile or feed them to the chickens or whatever.
Okay.
And you do that 2 or 3 times, get all of them off you can. The seeds that float are no good.
You want to get rid of those.
Right. The ones that sink to the bottom, you drain the water off. These are viable and ready to be used next year. I'll let them settle.
Mm-hmm.
I would do some more. Same process. Separate the seeds from the flesh. Do this for all the fruits that you've decided to save from.
Mm-hmm. Now, that's one thing that people may wonder about. Do you want to mix all of those fruits together and get your seed out of there, or would you keep them separate?
You want a good mix of the various genotypes, or whatever term you would use. So you will have a good mix of for the next generation.
Okay. Okay, so it's a good idea to do that. Now, once you've poured the seeds off and everything, then what do you do with that seed?
Basically, you take the seed, put it on a ceramic plate or a plastic plate of some kind, and just basically spread it out as much as possible. Leave it for a few days to dry, and come by and agitate it a couple of times so they don't stick together. And in a few days to 2 weeks, you've got dry seed ready to be stored away, hopefully in a glass jar that's nice and tight so moisture and air and everything can't get to it, and you're ready for next year. Make sure you label it, of course.
Right. And one thing you said, a plastic or a ceramic glass plate, you don't want to use paper.
Because it will stick to them.
Okay. And also, something else that some people think, maybe I should put these in the oven a little while and they'll dry faster.
No, you don't want to do that.
No.
Just natural drying at room temperatures would be fine. You might want to put a fan over them or something like that to speed up the air circulation, but that's all you need.
Okay. Well, we appreciate this, Bill, and we appreciate you showing us your garden. You've done a lot with a little bit of space.
Thank you very much.
We hope you've enjoyed this classic from the Oklahoma Gardening Vault. Remember, even though these tips and techniques are timeless, there's always something new to learn in the world of gardening. By subscribing to both Oklahoma Gardening and OK Gardening Classics, you'll have access to a wealth of gardening knowledge, both classic and contemporary.